Everyone, and welcome to the Airport Commission. It is September 18th, 2024, and by my watch, it is 6 p.m. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the public for coming as well. Always love to have you here to give us comments. Mo, will you do the honor of a roll call?
I do. Good evening, Commissioners. Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Okay. Commissioners Reed, Arcuri, and Houghton are all excused. Commissioner Maya?
Here.
Commissioner Grabman?
Here.
And Vice Chair Glazier?
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Director Haster, are there any changes to the agenda tonight?
No changes to the agenda, Vice Chair Glazer.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. It is duly noted that on Friday, September 13th, 2024 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary, Mo Graham, duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at the Airport Administration. At this time, do we have any speaker slips?
I have not received any.
Okay. Does anybody like to speak? Okay, and just a reminder, if there is a subject that's on the agenda, we give an opportunity to address the commission at the time that matter is taken up. So if you do change your mind, please let us know and fill out a slip for us. Thank you. Liaison reports. Thank you, Councilman Friedman, for being here tonight. We appreciate your presence. Do you have any updates for us?
Last night at City Council, we heard an update and just gave some feedback on the airport master plan, but it was a non-action item. It was essentially the same report that you had here, a little more detailed at the council. And noise, of course, was a major issue. Had a few public comment on that. But the working group is, as you know, going along, so that's helpful. And that's where most of the questions were focused, pretty much on the noise issue. And that's it for the purview of the Airport Commission.
Thank you, Councilman Friedman. This time I'd like to call Director Haster. Can you give us your report?
Thank you again, Vice Chair Glazer. I was just reminded by Jonathan over here that we actually have all of our managers here and all the positions filled right now, which is all in the same room at the same time at the commission. Has been a rare thing. So John Feldhands, Properties Manager, Mike Smith, Operations Manager, Jonathan Abad, Business Manager, Sarah Isa, Development Manager, and Andrew Bond, our Facilities Manager. So for those of you that may not have recognized all of the faces, we're all here, so ask all your questions. Just wanted to make note in the packet for the passenger counts that we've had. We've had another record-setting month, so you'll see 137,000 passengers. That's the highest that we've ever served through the terminal. And it keeps on setting records all the time. We did have an open house last night following the presentation to the City Council on the master plan. We had an open house on the General Western Aero hangars. Very well attended. I don't have the exact count yet, but I had heard somewhere around 75 or more. All different types of uses proposed, different age groups, different backgrounds. Very excited to see such a large turnout. So we will be gathering all of that information from that open house, summarizing it, bringing back a report to the commission on what was determined there, and then looking on how to proceed forward with the process from that point. But definitely looking to keep that moving. Councilmember Friedman already mentioned the master plan. I don't need to go into that anymore. The noise working group, I just wanted to let you know we did have one noise working group meeting so far, and you do have one commissioner that is on that group as well with Ms. Grabin. And we do have another meeting scheduled for next week. I don't remember. Wednesday, thank you. And I will say that everybody was very professional and very good to work with, and there are a lot of questions. There is a desire to get things done very quickly, and working with government, both here, not only at the city, but also with the FAA. It's going to be difficult sometimes to set some of those expectations for timing, but we are definitely dedicated to working with that group and seeing if there's some good progress that can come out. And we have a couple of members in the audience that are on the group as well. Aside from the noise working group, I just wanted to share that we do continue to meet with people that have noise concerns for the airport, and we will always continue to do that even outside of the noise working group. We specifically just met with the Hope Ranch Neighborhood Association just to provide information on what is going on, updates on the noise working group. So if you hear of anybody that has noise concerns that isn't a part of the noise working group but just wants more information, please refer them our way. We're happy to meet with them and talk with them. And that would be with myself and Greg Goodsill, our airport operations supervisor, who also handles our noise program. We might have a couple of, or we do have a couple of openings coming up on the commission, so if you know of anybody that has interest in serving with you, the deadline for that is next week, the 25th. I attended the Goleta train depot groundbreaking. It was very well attended, and it was interesting. I was talking with some City of Goleta officials, and as we were sitting there were people arriving on the train that were nervous about how do I get over to the airport, where do the Ubers pick up. So one of the nice things about this project is going to be better connectivity between the train station and the airport, and just from the one time I was over there is definitely needed. I wanted to give you an update. Our RFP for the FBO redevelopment is just about finalized. It's into our city attorney's office for legal review of the RFP. Still a little bit of review to be done on the draft lease as well, but we are getting very close to issuing that. And so I will give you an update before we issue that. We will then be looking for support for review panel, and then ultimately making a recommendation for selection at the commission and ultimately to city council. But definitely moving forward, and I'm happy to see that because I know it's been on a lot of people's mind. And then the last thing I have is I was contacted by one of the commission members. I won't single them out unless they want to say something, but just with the desire to hear more about what's going on the airport. One, with some of our buildings that may appear to be more derelict or not receiving maintenance, like the old Elephant Bar and things like that. And so we will be trying to put more items on the agenda to bring the commission up to speed with what's really going on. A lot of it is tied in with this FBO RFP with some of the buildings that we're asked about. But I would just want to say, please, I welcome, if you have questions about anything that we don't bring up, do like this person did and email me, and we will start to bring those forward. And if you have a specific item, happy to look into bringing those forward as well. That's all I have for the report.
Thank you very much, Director Hastard. I'd like to first thank you for your availability for people when it comes to noise complaints and how you've gone about that and being in the community and being out there for people to ask you, because I know that's been a big concern of everyone in town for a long time. So thank you for that, and certainly thank you for being at these different community events. You know, that's just one or two people maybe that needed help getting on an Uber or getting to the airport, but having your face out there is certainly great for everybody, and so thank you for doing that. Commissioners, do you have any questions or clarification on the director's report? I'd just like to say thank you again on the transparency on the different properties, because if you're not here at all the airport commission meetings and you don't hear, you know, things like you said, the Elephant Bar, it certainly looks like something's not happening there, but there are long-term plans. So thank you for addressing that. Are there any other speaker forums or any public comment at this time on the director's report? Seeing none, we'll move right along. Moving on to the consent calendar. I think I'm turning this back over to you, am I not, Director Hastard?
We have the items on the consent calendar. They are all items that we think are non-controversial and don't anticipate much public comment, so they will be all approved with one motion,
Okay.
if that is the desire of your commission. Or you can pull an item if you want for further discussion.
Any commissioners have any questions or comments on the consent calendar at this time? Seeing none, is there anybody in the audience that has any questions or anything that are on the consent calendar at this time? All right, pretty quiet crowd tonight, so we'll
I'd
keep.
make a motion then that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Can I get a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Looks like it passes 4-0. All right, and I'll call on Director Hastert again for item number 11 to introduce the FAA Airport Certification Inspection results for 2024.
Thank you, Vice Chair Glazer. Every year, we are inspected by the FAA from the airports division down out of Los Angeles. And they come in, and I hope I had forwarded to you the Part 139 regulation that is the regulation that covers commercial service at air carrier airports and all of the items that we have to make sure that we abide by with training and ARF service and markings and cracks on the runways and things like that. And so we did recently have an inspection, and so I have asked Mike Smith, our operations manager, just to do a quick debrief on the items that were noted on that inspection and our corrective action for those items. So, Mike?
Thank you. So I'll just give a quick presentation on this. And so a quick overview. Santa Barbara Airport is a Class 1 commercial service airport under Title 14 Code of Federal Regulation, Part 139. And that's basically based off of the serving scheduled large air carrier aircraft with more than 30 passenger seats. The airport currently holds an airport operating certificate from the FAA, mandating, as what Chris mentioned, strict compliance of safety and operational standards. Guess I shouldn't put that in my pocket. So then when it comes to compliance, the FAA conducts an annual inspection, annual certification inspection for all Part 139 airports and evaluates various aspects of the airports. As Chris mentioned, airport operations are emergency preparedness, fueling operations, pavement maintenance, passenger training, and records. Then the FAA presents its preliminary findings to airport management, issues a detailed formal inspection report, and then provides a letter of compliance and non-compliance. So our 2024 inspection results, they have identified 17 discrepancies across the airport, ranging from minor issues such as paint chipping, reflectivity concerns, faded sign, wind cones, vegetation, and small pavement cracks. Many of these discrepancies have already been addressed through our recent completion of our airfield marking signage and lighting project, as you guys are aware of. And that project basically was our airport diagram, updating our lightings, our signs, and changing all of our taxiway designations. So I'll just kind of go over some of the major discrepancies or some of the big ticket items here. So obviously you can see here largely faded sign. And these signs are very important for any aircraft approaching our runways to know there's multiple cues to stop before the runway. So you have the mandatory hold position markings, you have the enhanced taxiway center line, and then you have these surface painted signs. So just refreshing those. And this sign specifically was a part of the construction project, as I mentioned. Here's some vegetation on the fuel farm, and then our maintenance team, facility manager, they were able to clear it up to, I think, like 3 to 4 feet back there. Unfortunately, during the inspection, we actually had an active leak going on over there at the fuel farm, so we were able to address that immediately. A windsock, obviously we have a lot of birds out there, so cleaning those, refreshing those, but it was much easier for us just to replace the windsock. And then reflectivity issues, this is a center line leading to taxiway, the new taxiway Alpha 4, so just kind of refreshing that. One of the largest concerns on our inspection was the pavement depression over there in front of the terminal near Gate 3. So if you are on specifically southwest going into Gate 3, you will feel a little bit of a bump going through that area. This has been gradually getting worse, and our engineers have been inspecting it over time, but it had already been on a capital improvement project. We just decided to initiate repairs sooner. So on here, it said tentatively scheduled for September 23rd. That is now scheduled for October 1st and October 2nd. So we just had the contractor out here this afternoon just to verify. So we are finalizing that schedule. We're going to get that repaired. And this will be a temporary fix. And in the future, about a year from now, we will have a permanent fix of the whole area over there. So this has been getting worse over time. It's pretty significant. We did push, I did put out a couple NOTAMs restricting smaller aircraft to taxi through there. We just didn't want to take any chances of any kind of prop strike with the smaller aircraft going through that area. So, and lastly, that was it. There's a few other items, and our maintenance teams, we are actively resolving the remaining issues, and we will promptly respond to the FAA and submit the corrections. But the big part that I want to kind of hit on is, the FAA comes out here, they're inspecting our airport. They're saying, hey, you need to fix this, but it's not about it's really about the partnership. We're all here for the safety and security of the airport, and they're here to help us, and we're here to get ideas and advice from them to ensure that we're taking the proper precautions and to provide the best service possible to our community and our passengers. And that's all I have. So any questions for me?
Commissioners?
Tokens.
Does the FAA give you a certain time frame of when you have to fix the corrections?
Yes. So they gave us a whole letter. We kind of went back and forth on certain items on the correction date. And then if we're unable to make it, it's all about the collaboration. So working with them. And so far we've met everything. So we're still working towards that.
Yeah, I understand, maintaining an airport this size is a tremendously complicated endeavor. And I think y'all do a great job. I'm just curious, obviously there's a reason that certain things get inspected. Is particularly, for instance, the pavement markings, is there a routine refresh schedule that's, like every 2-3 years to repaint those to prevent them from even getting into that condition?
I think specifically here, ever since I got here, it's been kind of an ongoing thing. So we continuously inspect the surfaces daily. Anything is starting to fade, we will get it replaced or repaired as soon as possible. So I came from a larger airport, a lot of other airports, and they all have different plans. Obviously, at a larger airport, they will refresh all their markings yearly, but that is a highly expensive project.
Okay.
And of course, we want to work towards that, but for the most part, our markings look pretty good. Even out here, I think our inspector came out this year and said we were doing a much better job. So it's really just our team staying on top of it, reporting it to Andrew and his team, and whether or not his team can paint it or if we have to get a contract out here. So just staying up on it and looking for that.
And just to add to that, our engineers working for Sarah's team also do monthly pavement inspections as well. So they monitor conditions that we know are approaching something that we need to do, as well as identify new issues as they pop up.
Mm-hmm. And that particular one you showed the example of that looked rather faded, was that hadn't been addressed because it was involved in part of a construction project? Or was that the
Yeah, so
scenario?
if we know that there's a large construction project coming up that is going to address all of those issues, we won't necessarily repaint it unless if it gets to a situation where we do think it is beyond where it should be, obviously we would repaint that. But you could still see the markings, and we knew that the pavement project was coming up quickly.
Yeah, I imagine some of it's a little subjective there.
Yes.
So. Okay,
Very.
thank you.
Any other questions?
One other question about, as we welcome larger aircraft to Santa Barbara Airport, do we expect to have more issues with pavement depression and some of the taxiways around the terminal ramps?
I think there is a chance, but the larger aircraft coming in here, we're not going to have any aircraft larger than a Group 3, maybe a Group 4, so that's like basically a 757. So there is that chance, but we do have pavement inspections that are constantly monitoring that area, and I think most of our taxiways have a project on the books. It's just whether or not it's this year or next year that we're going to be addressing it. So I can tell you right in front of the terminal, we are working on a capital project to kind of replace all the asphalt in that area. And that's the main location that will see most of the depressions.
Mm-hmm.
So just to add to that, with our master plan, we have the design group of aircraft for the airport. And so all of the taxiways and pavement work that we do are designed to accommodate that aircraft. So I would say what impacts it more is frequency. So just like rubber deposits on the runway, the more landings you have, the faster that will develop. And so oftentimes with asphalt, it's actually good to have traffic going over it because it keeps the oils fresh in it. And so there's a lot of different factors. Our biggest factor that we have here, I believe, with some of our pavement issues is just the soil conditions underneath our pavement and ever-changing saturation and things like that.
The fact that you're like 4 feet above sea level, right?
And with the recent flooding, I mean, we've had significantly more flooding going on the runways, and it's something that we have to keep an eye on. So it's a big part of my job and the engineering that we just stay on top of it, we inspect it, and we provide the recommendations and repairs for the future development.
Good.
Just out of curiosity, for something like this, the short-term and long-term fix, what's a ballpark cost? Just if you have a number, and is that going to impact any of our budgets or anything, or any big variances that we should be aware of
Short-term and long-term fix for
for the depressions, for something like the one you showed?
Is Brad here?
our supervising engineer, Brad Cleansing, is here, and he's managing that contract, and I don't know the total off the top of my head.
Short-term, 100,000.
Okay.
Long-term, couple million.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so obviously with the short term, a lot of that is potentially coming out of our airport enterprise fund.
Mhm.
With the long-term projects, we're typically applying for grants for those that pay for 90.66% of that project.
Okay, that's great.
Can you just repeat the answer that was given since it wasn't in the mic so that the recording can get it?
So the short-term fix are roughly $100,000, and the long-term big project to cure that whole area is about a $2 million project. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Do we have any questions from the public? Seeing none. Since I posed the slippery slope of talking about financials, maybe we'll turn it back over to you, Director Hastert, and we can talk about financials.
Thank you, Vice Chair Glazer. I'm actually going to turn it to Jonathan Abad, who is the one that helps to keep our finances good and be able to do these projects to maintain the airport.
All right, good evening. I'm Jonathan Abad. I'm the airport's business manager. And tonight, I'll be presenting the fiscal year 2024 fourth quarter financial review. And once again, Santa Barbara Airport hit another record passenger count of 1.31 million ending fiscal 24. It's about 3% higher than fiscal 23. Total lease revenues up about 6.5% from fiscal 23 out of the four main categories of leases, starting with commercial aviation revenues up about 12.5% from last fiscal year. Commercial industrial revenues up about 8.75%. Non-commercial aviation up 7.5%. Terminal revenues up 1.71%. So in total, lease revenues of $28.9 million was received, ended within less than 1% of budget, actually, so it's pretty good. Terminal leases, let's just going to go deeper each of these categories. Terminal leases up 1.71% from last fiscal year, mainly from parking revenues, which is up about $250,000, or 4.23% from last fiscal year. Ground transportation also up $126,000. That's over 19% due to enhanced monitoring and increased traffic in the airlines. And next we have commercial aviation. It's revenue up almost $750,000, or about 12.5% from prior year, mainly from building lease and landing fees. And non-commercial aviation up about 7.5%, or about $400,000, also mainly from rent and landing fees. So here we are, the whole pie. Give you an idea how much each of the leases makes up. We got commercial industrial there, looks like 20%. Commercial aviation, that's at 23%. Commercial aviation, 19%. Terminal revenues, about 38%. So if you combine the terminal leases with the commercial aviation, comes out to, what do I have there? Number 6 there. Yeah, it comes out to about 61% of the total revenue. And then the remaining non-commercial aviation and industrial commercial revenues makes up the 39% remaining. And here we go. Total airport operating revenues up 12.57% from prior year. Also commercial industrial revenue up about $500,000, or 8.77%. And you'll see nearly $1 million increase there on the transfer end. That's the CFC that started last year. CFC, that's the customer facility charge. We get a $10 per contract fee that comes from the rental cars. that goes towards improvements in the rental car facilities. And let's see here, and you notice investment income's up quite a bit, probably due to higher interest rates. And you'll notice there's some miscellaneous income there up quite a bit. That's mainly about $500,000 up. That's the concessions grant that we received that was passed on to the terminal concessions. So we received it and just passed it on to them. Off to the expenditures. And thanks to the fiscal discipline by the SBA management team, total expenses were held at less than 0.5% total increase from prior year. Large reduction in transfer there, you'll notice. It's due to the completion of the $6 million Southfield redevelopment, which was mainly funded by the operating fund. And again, you'll see the about $438,000 other expenses. That's from the output of the concessions grant to the terminal concession. All right. Airport generated a total revenue of $30.8 million. And that's coming in within less than 1% of budget. And that's a testament to the accurate forecasting and financial planning. But even more noteworthy is this marks a 12.5% increase in revenue over last year. Demonstrates significant growth and strong performance. And these figures underscore the effectiveness of our revenue strategies and airport's continued upward trajectory. Now, the airport's total expenses for the fiscal year were just under $30 million. It's nearly identical to last year's, less than 1% difference. And even more impressive is that we came in about 8% below budget in the expenses. And this was achieved through the strategic savings across key areas such as salaries and benefits, supplies and services, and equipment budget. And these results highlight the strong fiscal discipline and effective financial management practice in place, ensuring that we're maximizing resources and operating efficiently. The airport's financial performance this year showcases the remarkable balance between the revenue growth and cost management, with a 12.5% increase in revenues over last year, expenses coming in 8% under budget and just within 1% from last year's level. These outcomes clearly reflects the dedication and strategic focus of our management team by driving impressive revenue gains while maintaining the strict fiscal discipline. The airport is well positioned for continued success and sustainable growth. So in that, we're off to the operating accomplishments and milestones at end of the year by division. Starting with properties, the successful appointment of our full-time properties manager in fiscal 24 resulted in exceptional performance in lease revenues. By year end, total lease revenues increased by, like I said, 6.5% over previous year, and led by strong results from commercial aviation and commercial industrial leases. For marketing, the team played a pivotal role in the successful return of the Delta Airlines to Santa Barbara in June. Their innovative approach and strategic marketing campaign not only elevated the airport's visibility, but also generated $83,000 in advertising revenue. That's marking a 33% increase from the prior year. And this achievement is particularly notable, and it represents a revenue growth of 2.5 times higher since fiscal 22, when we introduced Fuse Connect to handle the advertising. And we got the operation team achieved several significant milestones fiscal 24. demonstrating its ability to adapt to increasing airline traffic. We upgraded the the aircraft rescue and firefighting, that's ARF, service to Index C. This enhances emergency responses capability for larger aircraft like the 737-800, now with over 5 daily departures. And they also recruited 6 new airport security aides and filled 2 airport operations specialists positions, boosting terminal safety, traffic enforcement, and customer service. The airport police became a post-participating agency this year, raising training standards for all officers. These accomplishments reflect the team's commitment to safety, service, and operational excellence. Off to the facilities division, they worked tirelessly this year, completing critical infrastructure upgrades that further position Santa Barbara Airport as a top-tier airport. Notable accomplishments include converting Building 118 to leasable space, installed 6 EV charging stations, completed vital flood mitigation work, key repairs, remodels across terminal facilities, vital flood mitigation work following 3 significant flood events just in February. And these projects have enhanced operational efficiencies, improved tenant satisfaction, and demonstrated the airport's proactive approach to maintaining infrastructure in top conditions, ensuring long-term operational resilience. And we got the capital development support team that delivered impactful projects in fiscal 24, significantly enhancing the airport's infrastructure. And they completed the $5.5 million airfield marking signage and lighting project and the $6 million Southfield redevelopment project this year, modernizing key airport areas. They also supported the Delta Airlines seamless return with space planning and striping design, advanced terminal improvements, projects to 10% design completion, setting the stage for long-term facility enhancement. Finalized the master plan update draft, ADA upgrades, made substantial progress on long-term parking expansion, initiated the airport-wide pavement condition index study with AFP grant funding and design solution for future flooding at the Carneros Creek. And the team's impressive scope of work has ensured that the airport remains at the forefront of the aviation innovation, safety, and service for years to come. And finally, these accomplishments, they reflect the airport's dedication to operational excellence, sustainability, and strategic growth. And in conclusion, the Santa Barbara Airport's financial and operational performance in fiscal 24 has been exemplary. Demonstrating resilience and strategic foresight despite facing challenges such as severe weather conditions. The airport not only met but exceeded many of its budgetary and operational targets. The success is a testament to the support of the City Council, Airport Commission, the city administrator's confidence in the airport's leadership to maintain operational resiliency and unwavering commitment to excellence. Thank you. That's my presentation. Take your questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. First of all, that was excellent job, excellent presentation, and thank you for doing such a nice job controlling the OpEx. That's great to see, and big shout out obviously to John. Without that increased revenue from the leases, that bottom line looks much different. So thank you for doing that. Commissioners, any questions? No?
An amazing year.
I just had a couple, with passenger counts going through the roof and setting new records and everything, there were a couple of line items that jumped out at me. There's some negative numbers here under the terminal leases for rental cars, concessions, and gift shop, as well as the fuel fee. Do you have anything that might attribute to that?
Yeah, good question. Let's see here. We'll start off with the terminal leases. You notice the rental car was off a little bit, 5%. and some concession restaurant and gift shops of about 2%. John, could you add? We kind of discussed on that. We're going to look more into. We know rental car revenues really shot up during the COVID because I guess there was a shortage in cars and people renting more. I don't know if it's just starting to normalize or maybe there's.
One thing that I want to start looking into is our TNC numbers to see if people are more using the Ubers and Lyfts versus the actual rental cars, because that's not in here. But I know I'll have to work with Mike to get those numbers to see if that's what happened. But I can't think of any event that particularly happened that would lead to it, other than maybe people are using more Ubers and Lyfts than rental cars.
And I think on the concession side, I think that number is a little bit better than what we had seen in previous months. And so I know you guys were taking a look at that and seeing if there was any changes there, but it does seem to be improving a little bit. It's $13,000. It's a fairly small variance, but thank you.
And then next up, you mentioned
Fuel.
the fuel. And let me see here. And if you notice, for the non-commercial aviation, the fuel actually is up quite a bit, but in the commercial aviation, it's lower just as much, if not a little bit more. So I'm not sure. We'll have to look more and speak with the FBOs and see why the shift. But it could be fuel pricing or yeah.
Okay.
Can you add anything else to that, John? Or yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.
Sure.
Any other questions? Levi?
The rideshare and taxi, is there revenue generated for the airport for each one of those rides that arrives or departs from Santa Barbara?
Yes, there is a pickup and drop-off fee for Lyft and Uber. Is that correct, Michael?
Yeah, that's correct. And previously it's been $3 per ride, and we recently raised it to $3.50. So we are making a increase there. But.
And that increase is effective July 1st of this year. So we should see the results for the fiscal 25 budget.
And is that amount at the airport's discretion and in line with what other airports in the region are charging?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we made this presentation to council, we stated that argument, and basically there was a few other airports that were raising it around $3.50, and we wanted to be in line with that.
Okay.
And I feel like more of the airports are going to start to follow that.
Mm-hmm. Good. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, in particular, we did speak with San Luis Obispo, for instance, who made their fees in line with theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See, we may have a speaker slip. Sean, is this for this one? Sean, you want to?
Yeah, I just want to know what the difference between commercial fuel is and
Thank you.
What do you consider commercial aviation fuel versus non-commercial aviation fuel?
I believe it's the Jet A
So without going and reading what the definitions are, my best educated guess would be the fueling that the FBOs do for the commercial side is on contracts. So they go to the actual terminal and fuel those aircraft. The non-commercial would be the Jet A and Avgas that go into the general aviation, the corporate jets, the smaller aircraft and stuff like that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And as this is a presentation only, no vote required. So we will, move on to item number 13. Director Hastert, will you introduce this for us?
Thank you, Vice Chair Glazier. I'm going to kick off the presentation, and then I will hand it over to our consultants that are here in the room. So I just want to say we are going through a lot of different planning exercises and studies, and all of them are being tied together into our master plan, which we just presented to council and to the commission at the previous meeting. So very similar to the master plan team, we have our team working on the drainage master plan, which is what we are going to discuss tonight. So obviously myself as the airport director, Sarah Iza, our airport development manager, Brad Klinzing, back behind you over there, our supervising engineer, Jessica Metzger, I don't think is she here? Jessica Metzger, our airport planner, and Phil Davis, our project engineer. Similar team to the airport master plan, the prime consultant that we were working with is Mead and Hunt, but they do have a couple of sub-consultants as well that are working with them for specific items, earth systems, and downstream. So Carrie Nichols is our project manager. Bob Thane, who is actually here tonight and will be doing some of the presentation, is the project engineer, and Olivia Burke also with him here tonight as an engineer. And I'm going to hand it over to Bob and Olivia to continue with the presentation and be available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, airport staff, and thank you for commissioners for listening in. For the drainage master plan, the agenda for our presentation has 5 main points on it. Olivia will be presenting the first 3. We'll look at the drainage master plan update overview, what's involved with the drainage master plan, and then she'll take us through the existing conditions assessments and modeling and the proposed conditions assessments. And then I'll follow up with looking at the alternatives analysis and preferred development concepts.
Thank you. So we'll start with an overview of the Drainage Master Plan update. So the purpose of our Drainage Master Plan was to update the prior Drainage Master Plan done in 2001. So we provided an airport-wide drainage study to evaluate the existing drainage conditions on the airport and inform of any existing improvements needed, and then to guide future drainage improvements associated with future development. Our study included an inventory of the existing drainage system, a hydrologic and hydraulic analysis, and then conceptual designs and cost estimates to guide future construction. So the image up on the slide is an overview of our study area. Our study focused on the on-site drainage conditions, which you can see in that blue hatch within the airport property line. We did not model the off-site waterways such as Carneros Creek and Tecolotito Creek, which wrap around the airport to the west, and then San Pedro Creek, which is adjacent to the east, and then Goleta Slough on the south of the airport. However, we did include the water levels in these water bodies at the numerous outfalls that outfall off of the airport property to these waters. And then additionally, one more thing to note is that the majority of the airfield is within the FEMA 100-year floodplain. So to start our study, we conducted a basis of design to summarize the relevant regulatory criteria that affect drainage items. So we first summarized the Federal Aviation Administration advisory circulars that apply to drainage requirements. We looked at the California Regional Water Quality Board Central Coast Region requirements, and then Santa Barbara County, and then City of Santa Barbara. So we'll begin with our existing conditions assessment. So the image on this slide is the existing drainage map of the airport. You can see all the drainage inlets that connect to pipes that then outfall at all of those outfalls in the creeks and the slough. To summarize the data we use in our analysis, with the items in bold being ones we'll discuss a little deeper, we first looked at historical flood data as supplied by the airport. We had downstream services conduct a pipe conditions assessment to inspect select pipes across the airfield. We looked at environmental conditions assessment that was part of the master plan, site observations from a site visit, terrain and structure elevation survey done by NV5, also as part of the master plan, rainfall data in which we used 24-hour total rainfall depths for the area, drainage areas to delineate the amount of area draining to each drainage inlet, and then receiving water conditions being those water levels in the creeks and the slough. So to talk more about historical flood data, the airport has flooded 3 times within the last 2 years, once in January 2023 and then twice in February 2024. The images on these slides came from that January 2023 event. This event had about 2-year rainfall on site at the airport and then 25-year water levels in the surrounding creeks. The pipe conditions assessment, which was conducted by Downstream Services, they inspected the highlighted pipes shown on that slide. Generally, they found that the pipes were in good condition, and they identified a few maintenance needs that we'll summarize in our alternatives analysis later on. And then another thing to note was that outfalls 10 and 12 had standing water at the initial time of inspection, so the crew did have to go back out when the water was not surrounding that outfall. And then finally, the receiving water's conditions. So as part of the climate adaptation plan, we were supplied water levels at select FEMA stations in the surrounding creeks. We then interpolated these water levels to get the water level at all of those outfalls. So you can see for the 5-year, 10-year, and 25-year water levels on the screen, which is the peak water level in the storm, they are all higher than the outfall pipe invert, meaning that at least the bottom of the outfall is submerged fully during the peak of the storm. So we took all of that data and we input it into our hydrologic and hydraulic models for the existing conditions. We ran 3 models. We first did a 5-year design storm event with 5-year rainfall with no water levels at the outfalls, so we could assess the performance of the drainage network without those water levels. And then we ran a 5-year rainfall with 5-year water levels, and then a 10-year rainfall with 10-year water levels. Oh, and one more thing, we applied the peak water levels at the same time as the peak runoff rate on the airport to get a worst case scenario for our analysis. So the 2 main criteria we use in our analysis to assess the performance, the first one is an FIA criteria that there's no standing water after 48 hours of a storm. So first, for our 5-year free discharge scenario with no water levels, revealed that the airfield is able to drain within 48 hours and then is actually fully drained in 24 hours. So you can see that first top image is an example hydrograph of one of the outfalls. You can see that the peak runoff off the airport occurs at about hour 10 of a storm and then drains back down to 0, meaning that that outfall has drained fully. The 5-year and 10-year scenarios revealed that pipe flow is restricted when the outfall water surface elevations are at their peaks. You can see in the bottom 2 images that blue line shifts about 5 hours to the right, meaning that pipe flow is restricted until those water levels recede. However, the airfield is still able to drain within that 48-hour window. The second criteria we looked at is that surface water should not encroach on runway or taxiway pavements for the 5-year event. So we ran our models for the events and then pulled out the peak water levels at select drainage inlets and compared that to the pavement elevations. So shown on this map is our map of the peak water levels for that 5-year design storm event with free discharge conditions. So you can see in that bluish grayish color, that is where the water level was higher than the grassy infield elevations at the peak of the storm. And then that red color is when it intersects pavement. So when we apply the 5-year water levels, you can see that the amount of water at that peak increased for the storm. And then when you apply the 10-year rainfall and 10-year water levels, that increases as well. So we took note of all these areas shown in our mapping, and we addressed them later on in our alternatives analysis. So that concluded our existing conditions assessment, and we moved into our proposed conditions assessment. As part of the master plan, they developed this preferred development concept showing the future projects to update the airport. We took all these projects and updated them into our models, creating our proposed conditions models, and we'll show those results on the screen after we discuss the alternatives so we can show a side-by-side comparison. I'll pass to Bob for our alternatives analysis.
Thank you, Olivia. For the alternatives analysis, we had, again, two main goals. One, to minimize ponding in inundation areas, which, as noted and seen on the previous graphs, there was a lot of red on those charts since the airport is very flat, and with the creeks and slough around it, it is hard for it to drain. So we want to minimize ponding in inundation areas as much as possible, and with any drainage projects that are proposed, reduce maintenance as much as possible. When we looked at areas of interest and where future drainage projects could occur on the airfield, we took into account the flooding areas of interest that we just looked at in the modeling. Also, any known drainage concerns reported to us by the airport staff. Included is also the proposed development projects of the airport master plan, looking at short, intermediate, and long-term projects. And then with the pipe investigation performed by downstream services, for any identified maintenance concerns, there were also some pipe repair projects that were taken into account. At all of the areas of interest, we looked at multiple alternatives for solutions, and then those are weighed against various criteria in a matrix to determine the preferred alternative, and I'll come back to that. This map of the airfield shows various project locations as identified in the plan. The majority of them there are the green ones, the flooding areas of interest and known drainage concerns. At locations where those may overlap with short-term, intermediate-term, or long-term projects, in this image they were folded together as green with the flooding areas of interest. Beyond that, locations that weren't necessarily identified as concerns during the analysis but were added from the master plan, then we have the red, yellow, and purple items for short, intermediate, and long-term project locations. Also flagged there in light blue are two additional projects that were outside the master plan but are ongoing. We checked to see how those may relate to drainage for the overall airport. And then in orange there, mostly throughout the center portion of the airfield, were additional minor repair or maintenance projects identified with the pipe inspection. Again, as I said, at each of those locations, we looked at different possible solutions, different possible projects. We did weigh those in a matrix for scoring to help us identify what the preferred alternatives would be. The list here of 9 criteria was developed with the airport, and I won't go into all the details here, but we did, for each one of these, make a scoring matrix that rated high, medium, or low, depending upon how well an individual project related to supporting the needs and concerns of the airport. I will read through these quickly here with the higher priority ones at the top and then the lower priority ones at the bottom as per the scoring in the matrix. So the criteria were: maintains airport operability and safety, alleviates flooding and known drainage concerns, incorporates resiliency and sustainability, considers operation and maintenance, minimizes cost, supports regional stewardship and partnership, adheres with master plan, capital plan, streamlines permitting, and aligns with climate adaptation plan goals. So each one of those was considered as we chose solutions at these locations. Now I will show you the preferred alternatives that came out of that analysis. A brief overview. First of all, just the general information as prepared in the plan. On the right here is a sample data sheet that was prepared for the projects. I know you can't read this one, and it's just kind of a quick overview of what was included with the analysis. At each of these locations, we had the project information, project map, project narrative, and a rough cost estimate. These data sheets were prepared for any of the projects that were the known drainage concerns or would relate to short-term projects. The medium-term and long-term projects were also addressed in the report, but not as detailed. I'll go through 4 slides here that just give a quick overview of the projects that were summarized in those project sheets. On this sheet, we have pipe maintenance projects that were identified from various inspections. It could be a crack in a pipe, so a structural issue. It could be sediment buildup that was from prior projects. It could be a recommendation for lining a pipe to increase its, shall I say, slickness or capacity, ability to transport water. So there were 6 different locations that was identified with the pipe maintenance projects. On this slide, we look at 3 locations where the preferred alternative was simply providing some grading alternatives in the infield areas to lower the grades as much as possible so standing water can accumulate in the grassy area and get as much of it as possible off the pavement. The 4 items on this slide, and it's a little hard to see there, but the orangish tan highlighting, we're looking at additional studies and off-site work. Again, the study focused on the airfield drainage itself, but it is affected by the water surface surrounding the airfield. In the top left there, Carneros Creek, a project is already being planned for removing accumulated sediment, which should drastically help with reducing some of that flood water seen in the photos earlier in the presentation. In the top right there's a suggestion for an additional similar study to look at sediment removal in Teclatito Creek going around the western end of the airport and down into Goleta Slough. The bottom left there shows one particular drainage channel within the slough where additional maintenance and sediment removal could help with the drainage. And the bottom right shows the creek on the east side of the airfield there, San Pedro, where additional studies could be performed to look at alternatives for lowering the water surface there. On the 4th slide here with the projects, we have some miscellaneous projects that include relocating or rerouting pipes, often specifically in relation to upcoming master plan projects. We also look at one suggestion to put a new pipe across the runway itself to help move flood water south to Goleta Slough, where water surface elevation is lower, than trying to move the water east or west to the creeks where there's higher water surface elevations. The middle right and bottom right there look at potential for permeable pavement solutions within the parking lots, which allows smaller storms to infiltrate directly through the pavement. And the airport does already have one of those installations in place. Over the next few slides, we'll look at the combination of the proposed analysis with all of the master plan projects, as well as the solutions implemented. Again, the slate color, the blue-gray color is in the model, the ponded water on grass, and the red would be any surface water that's on the pavement. And then again, just a reminder, these all look at worst case scenarios. And I'll can toggle back and forth here. So this would be just the 5-year event rainfall on the airport, and then with the preferred alternatives in place, we do see a reduction in the amount of ponding, especially at those specific project locations. Stepping to the 5-year storm event with the 5-year water levels in the surrounding water bodies, again we see higher water levels here, and again with the solutions in place, a reduction in the pavement inundation there. The next step, the 10-year event, we see a lot of water, and again a reduction by these projects. The question could be raised, why didn't we get rid of all of the red? And what we did look at was essentially what was feasible. As was noted at the very beginning of the meeting, the airport is barely above sea level and does have multiple waterways around it that really restrict the ability for rainwater on the airport to go anywhere during big storm events. So we looked at best solutions, again weighted against the 9 criteria we discussed earlier. Apart from the master plan study, the airport is working on solutions currently. 2 items specifically relating to Carneros Creek, which has been the worst source of flooding in recent years. The airport is looking into having a temporary K-rail flood barrier installation, which would essentially be constructing a temporary levee with the portable concrete K-rails and then lining that with plastic to help keep any high water level from Carneros Creek from entering the northwestern portion of the airfield. That would be a short-term project. And then similar to that, maintenance project for Carneros Creek, with it being long and flat around the western end of the airfield there, looking into a design project that's almost to permitting stage of sediment removal, which allows the water to flow faster and lower around the airfield to help keep any of that from flooding onto the airfield itself. In addition to that, implementation, the 20 selected preferred alternatives, again, the related to known drainage concerns and short-term projects, those were the ones that were summarized in the project data sheets. The report also included recommendations related to intermediate and long-term project recommendations. And these projects, as much as possible, would be tied to capital improvement plan projects to aid in receiving funding and streamlining contracting and permitting processes. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Chris, or I can wait here for questions.
I'd suggest you wait there because I'm
Yes.
guessing there's probably going to be a couple.
Yes.
Commissioners? Levi?
Thanks. So, can you explain what's the reason for the increased flooding? Is it sea level rise or other factors? Increased storms? What are we looking at as far as the driving factor between 5-year, 10-year, and then what does 20-year look like? I know you didn't study that, but you know.
Starting with the first one, with regard to the recent flooding events, how much that could be contributed to changes in weather pattern, I don't have that answer. We do know and have been working with the airport on the regard with the fact that Carneros Creek does have a lot of sediment buildup in it, and we believe that is one of the key culprits for that recent flooding, which is why the airport is moving forward with proposed maintenance projects for doing some clearing and cleaning within Carneros Creek specifically. And then the second question.
Well, I'm
there?
sorry, I kind of bombarded you, but it's fascinating to me to see, you know, that you can actually project what this looks like with computer models over time. So I'm when you look at like 5-year versus 10-year, what's the driving factor for the difference between those two models?
So the 5-year and 10-year, the on-site rainfall modeling is based off of nationally published data, which is based off of 30 to 50 years of rainfall information, and then statistically normalizing it to project it to different year values.
Mm-hmm.
You asked about the 25. Why didn't we go with the 25? With the 25-year event, and looking at the 25-year event in the adjacent creeks, the water is essentially not able to drain out of the drainage pipes because they're underwater at the outfalls at that point, and the results would not be that much different from the 10-year event.
Okay.
As Olivia mentioned earlier, if you're talking about something like even bigger than that, the 100-year event, the airfield being down on the flatland right at sea level surrounded by creeks, it is within the 100-year floodplain. And at that point, the expectation would be all of the creeks would flood the airport out of beyond what any of the drainage pipes on-site could do. So again, at that point, then it's a flood control issue and not a on-site drainage issue.
Understood. So, and the outflow, the outlets being underwater would be a result of sea level rise as we're tracking trends over time.
Not necessarily sea level rise, but high water levels in the creeks and the slough. And there is an ongoing study right now that does look at the kind of the interface comparison of the two between flooding events from rainfall and sea level rise.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe another presentation will be coming later.
Yes, that's correct. We're just about ready to bring it to the commission, and that will have some climate data, some recent climate data that reflect these recent storms.
Okay.
Thank you. To answer your question, though, I can give you a little bit of a finding from the sea level rise study. They did look at rainfall amounts at the top of the pass, and 3 of those events which contributed to the flooding were more intense than usual. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Bruce?
A couple questions. Modeling is really fascinating. In your current conditions assessment, you did some modeling there for drainage to meet the FAA criteria, like the 48-hour drainage. So I was curious, how did that modeling align with the actual experience in the last 3 events in terms of the real-life drainage?
I can just touch on that just based off of my observations, but if you look at each of those events, we were back open within about 24 hours. The major portion of the delay in reopening was waiting for those water to come down off of the runways. So within that 24 hours, we were back open, but we still did have considerable amount of water on the airport and other areas, but then we would still have that other 24 hours for that to drain.
Mm-hmm. So the models were somewhat validated by the actual experience.
Yes.
Great. And then the other question is, so what's the next step here? Are some of these projects then going to be slotted in for work, or does it need to go through a bunch of additional review, or?
So obviously all of those projects will be implemented into our capital improvement plan, but for the short-term projects, as Bob mentioned with the cleaning out of Carneros Creek, that is a project that's being fully designed right now that we plan to move forward with fairly quickly. Permitting is probably going to be the biggest delay on that project.
No doubt, yeah. And then in terms of additional grading projects and those types of things. That's, what's the horizon on this? Are we lining up projects for the next 5 or 10 years?
We are, yes, and it's being combined with the master plan update as well. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at short-term, medium-term, and long-term implementation.
And if you had heard, part of that evaluation had to do with projects from the master plan being put in place as well. So there will be changes that come along with those projects in the master plan that are unrelated to drainage, but may need some shifting of drainage.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just looking at the maps, it seems like it's improving a lot of the taxiways and the runways, but then the parking, like where the airplanes are going to be parking, there's still areas where there's going to be lots of water. Is that a concern because the planes can come in, but it could be flooded where they're parking potentially?
So I know we're looking at other factors around the airport as well, and in general with the flooding that we experienced, it wasn't so much related to the draining of the waters on the airport, it was the inundation of the water coming in from the creeks.
Okay.
And so some of those projects should hopefully keep those parking areas from being flooded like they were in the past.
Okay.
And, yeah, and I will add again, those results are worst case scenarios, especially the ones that have the maximum rainfall on the airport at the same time the maximum water's coming down the creeks. But then again, at the northern part of the airport, I understand there are some potential private projects related to apron improvements that they would have to decide how they're going to do their project before they decide how they're going to do their stormwater management.
And Bob, if you might also add, when you look at the drawings that are on there and it shows ponding, the difference between what might be viewed on the drawing as ponding versus the flooding that we showed on the pictures.
Right. So what shows on our exhibits is the water specifically from just rainfall on the airfield, and it showed some pretty wide areas, but again, the airport is pretty flat, so we could be talking, inches here, which again, as demonstrated by the model, does drain down as soon as the creeks go back down. The exhibits that we had here did not show creek overtopping, which would be more a combination, I believe, of the resiliency plan and climate study plan. Did that answer your question, Chris?
Yes, thank you.
Just had a question on slide 28 and the cost recommendation here. Is that like 300,000 and change? Is that what that says?
I don't remember on that one, but it could be. I think we had projects that ranged potentially from that of value down as small as 10,000.
Okay. And is this to implement some of these shorter term fixes sooner, or what went into this cost?
The cost did look at them as independent projects, I believe, with contractor setup, mobilization, erosion control, all that. And in the fine print, there is a small escalation for it being out a few years.
Okay.
So, Commissioner Glazier, if what you're referring to is the sheet that shows that table right there, that's a single project. So that's a data sheet for a single project.
That's one project. Okay.
Yes.
Just in thinking about it and kind of piggyback on what Bruce was saying, if we've had 3 5+ year events in the last 2 years or less, and we just heard from our engineer that the cost to replace, one small depression area, having the runway flooded and deterioration of asphalt further, are EIRs required for this? What can we do to accelerate some of this in order to have some cost savings on the other side?
So it's going to be on a project by project type of basis.
Yeah.
Obviously, the short-term project that we're looking at right now for clearing out the channel is a lot of permitting involved.
Yeah.
Other ones may be CAD-exable. It's project by project.
Okay. All right. The timeline for some of the quicker fixes before the rains this year, is that too optimistic?
So if you look at the K-Rail solution, that is a quick solution that we would be able to bring in if there's a forecast for a major event coming our way. But no, all these other fixes will be put into the capital improvement plan for that 1 to 5 year period for the short term, and then going out longer for some of the longer ones.
Okay. Thank you.
Just ask carefully. Are any of those types of projects eligible for airport improvement funding, grant funding?
There's a number of different funding sources, and so some of these, yes, would be potentially eligible for AIP funding, especially if it's in combination with a taxiway project or something like that. And then there's also other funding sources that are becoming available that have to do with flooding issues and climate change and all of that. So we will continue to monitor different sources of funding that we might be able to use for these projects.
Thank you.
We're looking at redeveloping the FBOs in the North Field for general aviation. Obviously, much of the flooding falls in that area. How do you think this impacts the RFPs that are about to go out and the redevelopment of land that could very well be underwater in 10 years?
So I don't know all of the details, but I do know that as we do new construction, they definitely look into the floodways, floodplains, all of that, and that's incorporated with requirements for that construction. Part of the reason why this RFP for the FBOs has taken so long to get out is we are providing much more information about our current facilities, about the challenges with building in Santa Barbara with our review process. We get very beautiful buildings, but it is quite a review process. So we don't want any surprises for anybody that is putting in a proposal for the FBOs, so that they really understand the current conditions, development conditions, and it's going to be a fairly lengthy document with a lot of information to provide that transparency.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do we have any questions from the public? Any more speaker slips? No? No? Okay, with that, I believe that's our last item. Doesn't require a vote. Do we need a motion to adjourn? All right, then by my watch, it's 7:16 p.m. And that wraps up the Airport Commission. Thank you.